Well, welcome to the Leadership Institute. My name is Cabot Phillips. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform, and I am so excited to be the master of ceremonies tonight for a wonderful evening celebrating 40 years of the Leadership Institute, 10 years. Thank you. As well as 10 years of our online publication, Campus Reform, and perhaps most importantly, 80 years of our beloved founder and president, Morton Blackwell. So we're going to get things started right away, get the program going on time. First, joining us to open things up with a prayer is Star Parker, who is the president of CURE, as well as the newest Leadership Institute board member. Please join me in welcoming Star Parker.
Hallelujah. Whew. I had to say that because we're in Washington, D.C., and in the swamp, you don't get to hear that much. But anytime you're with Morton Blackwell, I think we can say hallelujah. Oh, glory to the Lord. Would you bow with me and let's open in prayer by going before the throne of God. Oh, Lord God of Israel, there is none like you. You keep your covenant with us, Lord, and we thank you. We thank you for this moment in history where we can celebrate 80 years of Morton and his vision. We can celebrate 40 years of the Leadership Institute, and we can celebrate 10 years of campus reform. Because all of this work, Lord, is to help survive that vision of yours that you put into our founding fathers to develop out a country based on the principles of Christianity, the virtues of capitalism, and the rule of law that's outlined in our Constitution so that anyone from any background or ethnicity, anyone that even just needs to be born again, can come to this great country, can be a part of this great country, can be renewed by you, and can develop their talents, their gifts, their skills to reach their purpose. So we thank you for this night of celebration, Lord God, as we celebrate Morton and the surprises that are on the program that I'm not supposed to mention, so I won't. As we celebrate 40 years of the Leadership Institute that we know will continue a great work through all of the interns and others that have made this strong and the supporters that are in this room that have been there from day one. And we thank you for now the aggression of the campus reform to go out there and renew the minds of the next generation. In Jesus' name, we give you all glory and praise, Lord God. Amen.
I don't know about you guys. I want to hear a full sermon from Star Parker. That was wonderful. Next up to introduce Morton tonight, we have a member of the Leadership Institute board and the executive director of the Institut de Formation Politique. Now, there are free market warriors over in France, and this is one of them, and that is LI board member Alexandre Pesey. Please join us to introduce Morton tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Morton Blackwell is coming from Louisiana. He's a Republican. At the time, there were not many. They were actually even an endangered species. But Morton decided to change that and get things done. Quickly, he took leadership position and became College Republican state chairman. Morton is in his 20s. He already showed his political talents. In the 18th century, when at the same age, Napoleon showed his military talent in Corsica, the French island where he grew up, his general-in-chief told him, Napoleon, Corsica is too small for you. You need to go to Paris. 2 centuries later, the same exact story happened. Morton, Louisiana is too small for you. You need to go to Washington, D.C. But not to end his life alone, like Napoleon on St. Helena Island, Morton decided to marry Helen, a saint, some would say, who became his beloved wife, recently called to look after us from above. Our young Republican trooper continued his road and became, at the age of 23, Barry Goldwater, youngest delegate to the 1964 Republican National Convention. 1 year later, our Goldwater boy became the executive director of the College Republican National Committee. He was maintained under 4 presidents. So people would say, presidents go, Morton stay. 1979 is a turning point. That year, Morton created what will become the Young Conservative Military Base, the Leadership Institute. The number and effectiveness of conservative will give us the victory became Morton's motto. Morton's mission in life became crystal clear, building the next generation of conservatives. In 1980, he organized and oversaw the national youth effort for Ronald Reagan. Once elected, President Reagan called Morton at the White House. He stayed 3 years, but then decided to go back to his main missions. Make philosophically sound young conservative, technologically proficient. After 40 years under Morton's leadership, LI has trained 218,933 students. Today, LI has a team of 86 full-time staff and a $15 million budget. All that's possible thanks to generous and faithful donors. Morton has built a school. Yeah. Morton has built a school, even more, the home for young conservatives. His impact went beyond America's border. Maybe as a reminder of his fight against communism, his generation and friends helped to defeat in many countries. In Chile, Poland, Austria, Brazil, France, through the world, Morton spread the word and built a conservative network. Morton did even much more than that. Let me tell you a short story. As any Blackwell boy knows, you have to tell a story when you deliver a speech. Here is a story. In 2000, I was an intern at LI, and a few years later, Morton offered me to join him at the Philadelphia Society. The most impressive meeting between conservative intellectuals I ever attended. At the dinner table, I was seated on his left. On his right was sitting a young, beautiful LI graduate called Kate. Morton looked at me and said, "Alex, let me introduce you to Kate. The both of you should know each other." What Morton didn't know is that we already knew each other. We even had a crush on each other. Actually, to be more precise, I had a crush on Kate. She didn't know yet she had a crush on me. So when two LI graduates meet, what do you think happened? They marry, they have children, we got 5, and they live happy. They also try to be faithful to what they learned at LI and from Morton. So with Kate, we decided to increase the number and effectiveness of young conservatives in France. In 2004, the Leadership Institute France was born. We trained thousands of students thanks to 5,000 individual French donors, all that because Morton decided to take a chance on a young French nobody. Thank you, Morton. He's one of the key founders of the American conservative movement. He's a general-in-chief of thousands of young conservative activists in America and abroad. He's Vice President Mike Pence's hero. He's our friend, our mentor. Please join me to give a standing ovation to Morton Blackwell.
you. Thank you all. Thank you for that wonderful applause. I am just overwhelmed by how many wonderful people, some of whom I haven't seen recently, but this room is filled with important folks. And if you want to make me happy, before you leave, meet 2 or 3 of the others in this room whom you have not met before, because that's how we build a movement. Now, you just heard Alex say that Kate did not realize that she had a crush on Alex at the lead up to that Philadelphia Society meeting. I got news for you, Alex. I had made arrangements for Alex to come to the Philadelphia Society meeting. Kate, who was here working for us on development, came up to me and said, "Morton, I understand that there's this meeting of the Philadelphia Society, and I would really very much like it if you could get me invited to come as a guest to the meeting," and I did. And the rest of what Alex said is correct. They did sit on separate sides of me at that first event. But for the entire remainder of the Philadelphia Society meeting, nobody sat between the two of them. It amazes me that it's been 40 years at the Leadership Institute and 10 years at LI's campus reform already. When I began the Leadership Institute, my friends told me that no one could build a strong educational foundation on the basis that I intended. All conservative education foundations then focused on the important work of teaching about issues, philosophy, and public policy questions. Fortunately, I found wise and generous donors who decided to support my vision of finding good conservatives and then teaching them how to win. So thank you, for all of you, for what you did to make the Leadership Institute possible, the donors particularly. I'm honored that Richard Vickery, for whom I worked 1972 to 79, is there, and boy did I learn a lot from Richard Viguerie. And one of the things that I learned from Richard Vickery, which appears on my 45 Laws of the Public Policy, this is a direct quote from Richard: "You can't save the world if you can't pay the rent." And that is certainly true. Without the people in this room, donors, Leadership Institute staff, and faculty, there would be a lot less to celebrate today. The Leadership Institute is my life's work, but LI's accomplishments are shared with the many conservatives like you who have made them possible. Thank you for some of those wise and generous donors who are in attendance this evening. None of this could be possible without your continued support. To date, the Leadership Institute has attracted 229,451 Leadership Institute donors. And we are growing. Until this year, the largest number of new donors that the Leadership Institute had acquired in a year was 19,000. To date this year, the Leadership Institute has acquired 26,219 donors, and the year isn't over yet. To the dedicated LI staff, interns, faculty, field reps, more than 1,200 people have actually worked for pay at the Leadership Institute over all the years, and they have populated many of the best conservative organizations in the country. Today we have here 86 full-time Institute staff. We have 440 volunteer faculty who share their time and expertise at Leadership Institute programs because they want to train the next generation of conservative activists, students, and leaders. To the principled and courageous students who have formed thousands of campus leadership programs groups, who send tips to campus reform, and who report on leftist bias and abuse as campus correspondents for campus reform. And to, I guess this is the exact number, to the 2,933 Leadership Institute graduates in the last 40 years, conservatives who want to win. Thanks to you, the Leadership Institute is growing. We're reaching new heights. The Leadership Institute is offering new programs and training more conservatives. In short, the evidence is strong that the Leadership Institute is succeeding. And allow me to demonstrate the excellence of the work you enable the Institute to do. Thus far in 2019, LI has achieved more than 9,500 conservatives trained and more than the 218,933 total grads since 1979. 2,181 currently active conservative and libertarian student groups, of which 52 are student publications, all part of our campus leadership program. Thus far this year, our staff has added 472 new independent conservative campus groups this year to our campus leadership program. And our staff in this calendar year has found 46,453 self-identified conservative and libertarian students on campuses this year. Campus reform has produced this year stories about liberal bias and abuses, stories by staff and correspondents, a total already this year of 930 stories about leftist abuses and bias on campus. And campus reform has attracted this year already 4.7 million unique visitors and 11 million page views. And 2019 isn't over yet. The past 40 years have brought many changes to the Leadership Institute. But while the technology, location, size, and staff of the Institute have changed considerably since 1979, one thing has remained the same: our mission. There's another page stuck here. Here we go. If you had asked me our mission on the very first day, I would have told you exactly the same thing I'll tell you tonight. To increase the number and effectiveness of conservative activists and leaders in the public policy process. Today, the conservative movement prospers in many ways because so many of us have studied the political process and worked together to implement our knowledge about the real nature of politics. The real nature of politics is a lesson that you likely have heard from me before. Being right in the sense of being correct is not sufficient to win. The winner in a political contest is determined over time by the number and effectiveness of the activists on the respective sides. The number and effectiveness of the activists on a given side is determined by its use of political technology, which includes organizational technology and communications technology. You owe it to your philosophy to study how to win. You have a moral obligation to study how to win. That's the foundation of the Leadership Institute and its many programs that you make possible. It seems like yesterday that I first walked into a little office sublet from the National Right to Work Committee. It was early February, 1984. I sat behind my desk and went to work on my first official day as the full-time president of the Leadership Institute. I had worked as a volunteer president from 1979 to 1984, but this was the day I would turn my focus exclusively to the Leadership Institute. I remember it well. Our offices was, not offices, office, singular room, was provided generously for us at a very reasonable rate by Reed Larson at the National Right to Work Committee, just outside the Capitol Beltway in Springfield, Virginia. The thing that I thought about most on that first day was how happy I was that my wife, Helen, had supported me in my decision to work full-time at my fledgling Leadership Institute. The idea that I would leave the guaranteed salary of a good job on the White House staff and all its perks to work for a little group that I had founded might not have made much sense. The Institute had never made enough money to pay me a salary anywhere near what I was earning at the White House. The big question was whether or not this organization I had started in '79 would, in 1984, enable me to pay the mortgage and put our kids through school. It was an open question, and I didn't know the answer. I thought then, on that very first day, what a wonderful thing it was for Helen to go ahead and encourage me to take this step. Looking back at it today, however, I'm not surprised. Helen was always the Institute's and my biggest supporter. Without her support, the Leadership Institute never would have gotten started, and you and I would not be together here tonight. My 27th law of the public policy process says it's a long ball game. As a movement, we are on the brink of changing our country for the better. We are on the verge of making significant progress toward our policy goals: lower taxes, less government, a strong national defense, and traditional moral values. But still, it's a long ball game. Think of this. You'll be able to see much of the good which will come from the Leadership Institute activities in 2019. You've seen much evidence of the Institute's accomplishments and effect in the last 40 years, but much more good will be done thanks to the Leadership Institute than you and I will ever be able to measure. Because when you prepare good people and launch them in the right direction, they will, many of them, do good things you may never see or hear about. Some conservatives you and I have trained through the Leadership Institute will be fighting for conservative principles for the rest of our lives. Some will outlast almost all of us and do good things for our country which you and I will never see, things which will make America better for our children and our grandchildren. Think of the victories they will achieve in our shared fight for free enterprise, limited government, a strong national defense, and traditional values. think of the good results which will come for decades from the 218,000 plus graduates of the Leadership Institute. Isn't it encouraging? What a legacy for America. The culmination of my efforts for our country and my conservative principles is the Leadership Institute. It is my life's work. Thank you for what you do to support the Institute and to advance our shared conservative principles. Thank you all for filling my life with a very high level of job satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Morton. And to remind people further of all the work that Morton and the Leadership Institute have done in the last 40 years, our wonderful video team here at LI has put together a little video for you guys to watch, and so enjoy.
Hi, my name is Dan Crenshaw, and I'm proud to serve America, first as a Navy SEAL, and now as a congressman from the great state of Texas. I'm so thankful for this opportunity to talk to you. I owe a debt of gratitude to conservatives like you who love our country and generously support the Leadership Institute. Let me explain by telling you a little bit of my American story. I call it that because I want you to be thinking about your American story too. A few years ago, during my third tour of duty in Afghanistan, an IED blast killed my interpreter, destroyed my right eye, and blinded my left eye. Doctors told me I'd never be able to see again. But thanks to God, I regained vision in my left eye after several surgeries. When I joined the military, I knew I might have to give my life for our country. But it was worth it, because America is so special. It's an honor that part of my American story is making a sacrifice for our country.
Our country was built differently, not based on government, not based on the collective, but based on the individual and individual choices. President Reagan said it's the shining city on the hill. He's right. There's story after story after story, people coming here with nothing and making something of themselves and raising their family.
I was raised to believe that anybody could be anybody in America. My grandfather, my father raised me to believe that. I grew up really inspired about this nation. People asked me what I was thinking about on Inauguration Day up on that platform as I stood up, took my oath of office.
I, Michael Richard Pence, do solemnly swear.
I spent a lot of time thinking about my grandfather and thinking about that he was right about this country. And this is a land of opportunity.
America is unique in the world. It's the only country that I know of that was founded on ideas, and they were written down in the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. Leadership Institute donors understand and love the country.
You and I know being an American is one of the greatest gifts a person can receive. No people in history have enjoyed the blessings that we have. But with blessings also come an obligation to make sure our freedom endures for future generations.
We have to understand that we inherit a tradition and that our chief role in life is passing that tradition on to the future so that that foundation can continue to stand. I think the great danger right now is that if you don't attend to the upkeep of the foundations, the entire building could collapse.
Each generation gets one shot at transmitting its values to the next generation. Probably our greatest danger is that we will lose sight of the things that have made us America. In other words, we will lose American exceptionalism, and we will replace it with something else.
Anybody who studies history knows that there are countries that have lost that liberty, and many of them never recovered it. And so it is very important that those of us today develop folks who can carry on the battle and who can lead the battle in the future.
But as Ronald Reagan reminded us, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. The Leadership Institute teaches young people how to defend freedom. It teaches them essential political skills that every Constitution-loving American should possess. And they train, teach, and equip our frontline freedom fighters, journalists, campaign managers, candidates, grassroots leaders, digital specialists, and volunteers. The Leadership Institute ensures politically active conservatives have the best tools and training to yield success. As a Leadership Institute donor, you understand how important it is to invest in our youth and train America's future leaders.
Leadership Institute was the first educational foundation among conservatives that focused on teaching conservatives the skills that are necessary to win. I've seen many a young person that I've trained come back and say, I took your training and it has changed my life, and here's what I have done since you trained me 5 years ago.
The Leadership Institute helped keep me within the conservative movement. It provided a background and connections and professional experience that I was able to benefit from. I could have worked for some moderate Republican and been part of the swamp if I had taken the wrong job at the wrong time.
They had someone reach out to me. They had an individual work with me and drive up to New Jersey and meet with me and give me ideas, and all paths sort of led to Morton Blackwell. People sort of said, well, you can call Morton and they'll do this grant to start your publication. So he gave me $500.
I used to be a Democrat, and I had never given the right a chance because I always thought that they were racist. That's what was always told me. There is criticism straight out of the gate if you align with the conservative side as a black person. Morton has really trusted me to be an ambassador for the, because I think when we first met each other, we connected just on a personal level of the fighting for the soul of this country.
Thousands of Institute graduates are working as leaders, staff members, campaigners, and volunteers for good conservative causes. Today, I stand in a long line of conservative leaders who owe a debt of gratitude to Morton Blackwell, to the Leadership Institute, and to you. So many conservatives have learned how to win through Morton Blackwell. Even our outstanding Vice President, Mike Pence.
When Mike Pence, the candidate, came by in 1988, I saw that he was an excellent conservative.
It was the last year of President Reagan's administration. But it was then that I was putting together a campaign. I was 29 years old, didn't know much about politics. You introduced me to a young man who ran that first campaign of mine. Seeing the experience that that young man had had here at the Leadership Institute contributed greatly to a start in our career.
Public office had never been something I aspired to, but as I watched the freedoms I had sacrificed so much for slipping away, I knew I had to do something about it. Running for Congress was another way to continue fighting for this amazing country you and I love so much. And like any good Navy SEAL, I knew I needed specialized training and preparation. I had to actually win an election if I was going to make a difference. I faced an uphill battle. I was unknown, outspent, and totally new to politics. I sought out the best training there was for conservative leaders. Everyone I asked told me about an organization called the Leadership Institute. So I signed up. I didn't take just 1 or 2 courses, I took 7. It was your support of the Leadership Institute that made it possible for me to learn how to run a campaign, how to craft my message, how to speak effectively in public, and how to handle the media. Above all, I learned how to win.
You have a moral obligation to study how to win. And if you don't study how to win and your opposition does study how to win, then they're going to beat you no matter how right you are.
They're training people for action, and that I think is what differentiates Leadership Institute from so many of the other conservative institutions that are out there. A lot of conservative institutions will give you a reading list. Leadership Institute will give you a skill set.
Right now, everything you and I cherish about our country is being threatened. Socialism used to be a dirty word in America. Now it's in vogue, even though many in our younger generation don't really know what it means. Universities that once taught our youth how to think critically about ideas have become little more than liberal indoctrination centers.
I fear for not only my children, but for this entire generation. We don't teach about the past. We don't teach about history. What are kids being fed? Political, ideological, partisan narratives. And if you don't know history, you can't defend the foundations of this country.
We're not talking about basic kitchen subjects anymore. We're talking about full-blown socialism versus capitalism. This is literally for the fight of the country right now.
The millennials are a left generation. By polls, they're a left generation. If that generation is lost, then every election from here to the end of time is going to be in trouble.
If you go down every single issue that we're facing today as a society, as a culture, it started on the college campus.
Right now, the future leaders of America are in these colleges. What sort of leaders will they be? That depends on the decisions you and I make today, and whether we strike the spark for liberty in them now while they're in college.
Some of the most important decisions that we make in our lives happen in those college years. When I arrived at college, I had just been the Youth Democrat Party coordinator in Bartholomew County, Indiana. I had been kind of a community organizer.
Well,
the truth be told.
The church makes provision for late vocation.
I came to realize that the values in my heart and in my mind were the values of the conservative movement. Make no mistake about it, it was the impact and influence of appealing, engaging conservatives who challenged me to think afresh.
That's why the Leadership Institute is committed to teaching young people the value of freedom and how to defend it. They help conservative students organize and stand up for their beliefs and help them take on their leftist professors.
Every year, we send out numerous field representatives to go on college campuses and find students who are conservative, and we encourage them to start student groups.
A few years ago, I went to a conference and I got to hear from some people who told me, hey, you can do this for a living if you apply yourself and take these steps and really work hard. And you will get the chance to defend what you believe for a living in one way or another. And that was the spark for me.
The spark was already there. What LI did is pour gas on it. And they were like, we got this little line right here. Let's just gas them up right now and just let them just go out there. Once they figure out what you are fighting for and what field of study that you're best suited for, they pour gas on it. And then you go out.
Right now, politics is a knife fight, and we need warriors, and the Leadership Institute produces those warriors.
Hayden Williams, this brave young man who was standing out in the square in Berkeley, at UC Berkeley, the home of the free speech movement, and was assaulted for peacefully expressing his views. Who was he? He was someone that was a Leadership Institute leader.
Out of nowhere, these two protesters approached our table. I pulled out my phone and started to record when they started to cuss at us and yell at us because I knew it would possibly be a bad situation. He's flipping over our table. All our recruitment materials go flying. He then is ripping up our signs, and he turns around to me and tells me to get my phone out of his face and then starts pushing me, punching me. He smacks my phone out of my hand again. Before I know it,
whap! This burly leftist thug comes, knocks him down and gets on TV. It made such news that when President Trump was at CPAC, President Trump called him up, gave him the microphone, hugged him.
Hayden, come up here, please. Come. There's so many conservative students across the country who are facing discrimination, harassment, and worse if they dare to speak up on campus. It's as important now than ever to work at Leadership Institute and campus reform. These students do it because they have a love of our nation and freedom. He took a hard punch in the face for all of us. Remember that.
And as a result of that, the president decided to do something. He sent out an executive order to 10 departments and agencies of the federal government to make sure that the colleges that are getting research grants are protecting free speech on the campus, and if not, yank the research grants. That was fun.
We need more Hayden Williams, and we need more Americans to step up and support the Leadership Institute to train the next generation.
There are 2,700 campuses, four-year schools in the United States. And you could organize a conservative group on virtually every one of those campuses.
LI's organization on campus is a deeply important, vital part of the effort to reach those minds. If LI were not there, fewer minds would be reached, and every mind that is changed is a possible link in that chain of history we're talking about to preserve the civilization.
If you want to preserve the America that has made your life great, then either you fight, or if you don't want to fight, help provide the resources for other guys to go to the front line.
The Leadership Institute is very, very important because they actually have proof that they can do the things that they say they want to do.
There are tons of organizations out there that want people's money that end up being short-lived vanity projects. Morton's not doing this for himself. He never has.
I think it's probably inarguable that you have trained and inspired more conservative activists in the last 50 years than anyone in American history. I don't have too many heroes, but Morton Blackwell is one of my heroes.
Morton's been a key leader in the movement for decades now, and he has thousands of principled leaders in positions of influence. It's really remarkable. And frankly, those who support them, support Leadership Institute, can pat themselves on the back for that.
We're winning. Our ideas are winning. And I'm absolutely confident that if all of us continue to do all that we need to do, we're going to make this country more prosperous and more secure than ever before.
I fought and bled for 10 years as a Navy SEAL to keep America free. Your support of the Leadership Institute helped put me in Congress to defend our principles, and now my American story of service continues. What about your American story? How will your legacy keep America free for your children and grandchildren?
If we don't teach them conservative principles, nobody's going to. I'm talking about the Leadership Institute, campus reform, parents, grandparents. If we don't do this, it's not going to be done.
It will not be enough just to win the next election. We've got to win the next generation. And that's what the Leadership Institute is all about.
I know firsthand the Leadership Institute is the best investment you can make for America's future. They don't create politicians, they create leaders. And that's what America needs, especially now in these perilous times. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Well, thank you for that wonderful video. Stephen Klaus, thank you so much for putting that together for us. That was wonderful. And your team did a great job in showing the impact that the Leadership Institute has had and continues to have in the fight for our future. And so Morton knew about that, and Morton has known about much of what's going on tonight. But the rest of the stuff Morton is not totally aware of. And if we... Is this going to become a roast? He says. I think you're in the wrong room if you're looking for people to say something bad about you, Morton. That's not in this room. And so we would like to take the next few minutes to intentionally celebrate Morton, to make sure that you leave this room knowing how valued and how appreciated you are by so many in this movement. And so, yeah. And so we have a few people here tonight that are going to come up here, and we all know how effective storytelling is, going to tell a few of their favorite stories about you and some insight into the impact you've had in their lives. And if we had everyone get up and tell a story, we'd go all night. So we got just a few people. First off, getting us started is Mr. Kevin Gentry, who is the VP of Special Projects at Coke Company's public sector and a former Leadership Institute employee. Kevin, come on up.
So as Cabot said, a few of us who've had some association with Morton were asked to say a few words, and mine is a little related to everything that we know, trying to bring it all together how many people do you know that just uttering just their first name brings an immediate understanding and connection? I mean, there's Beyonce, there's Kanye, there's Cher, there's Morton. Those of you in Virginia know that for all those times that Morton would run for election as Virginia's Republican National Committee man, the chant was, "For Morton years." Well, little did you know that Morton is actually an acronym. Morton has, the 6 letters of Morton have a special meaning. The first M in Morton is for memorable. We all have been able to hear his great storytelling abilities over the years. Who doesn't remember some of the great anecdotes that were told? However purposeful for the moment they may have been, we all remember those great anecdotes. M is for memorable. O is for original, that there truly is only one Morton. And I shared with Morton that I was going to tell a story that many of you in this room may be familiar with, but he probably didn't know about until tonight. In 1996, in the summer, the construction and renovation of this building was coming to a head, but as construction projects go, it was running a little late. And we were right up against the building dedication and the move. The move got delayed, and it coincided with the meeting of the Mont Pelerin Society in Vienna, Austria, that Morton was planning to attend. Morton, the original, came to me that afternoon and said, "It has occurred to me that the move-in is going to happen while I'm in Vienna, and I will not be present to personally supervise every box being placed and every picture being put on the wall. I think I'm going to have to cancel my participation in the Mont Pelerin Society meeting as much as I would like to be there." What Morton didn't know is the greatest grassroots and grass tops campaign in the history of the conservative movement of the world then ensued. Everybody was recruited to ask every conservative leader around the world to personally phone Morton and tell him how critical his participation was in Vienna, Austria. The next day he came to me and said, "I had no idea my participation was viewed that valuably. As much as I need to be here to personally supervise the move of every box and every painting, I think I better go to Vienna, Austria. So for that, I thank you." And that is Morton, the original. All right. R. R stands for reliable. You all know in Morton's Laws of the Public Policy Process that he says that an ounce of loyalty is worth a pound of cleverness. You'll also know that Harry Truman famously said that if you want a friend in Washington, D.C., you better get a dog. Well, Harry is wrong on that. We know in Washington, D.C. that there is no better, more dedicated, devoted, loyal friend than you'll ever find than Morton Blackwell. R is for reliable. T is for training. Now, many of you know over time, you ask somebody, how did you get involved in conservative politics? Well, I read The Road to Serfdom by Hayek, or I read something by Ayn Rand, or it was Barry Goldwater's campaign, it was Reagan's campaign. If you're in Virginia, it was maybe Dick Obenshain's campaign. But I think we can confidently say today that the vast numbers of people who are active and leading in the conservative movement are the product of Morton's training. My wife, Ann, who also is a part of the training, she used to joke that it was also the conservative dating service. So Alexandre and Kate, maybe you're right. But in terms of the impact not only that it has had, but even if Leadership Institute were to shut down today, which obviously it won't, the consequences will go on for decades. T is for training. All right. O is for, almost forgot, O is for outstanding. Now for that, Morton did note about the roast. 30 years ago tonight, there was a roast for his 50th birthday party. You had some great principled conservatives among the roasters, Marshall Coleman, Trent Lott, but no, there really were some great conservative roasters there. And one, Ed Meese, and I got his permission to repeat this, Ed said that night at the roast, "What is it about Morton that you can, what is it that you can say about Morton that he hasn't already told you himself? One of the great and most memorable lines. But Morton truly is outstanding. He is outstanding in his field. He is often outstanding in his daylilies. He's often outstanding among his beehives. He is outstanding in his fruit orchards out in Madison County. That, by the way, is a pun you would probably hear Morton share at a Leadership Institute 4th of July soiree. All right, we'll get to N. N is for never. Never failing. Never squishing out. Never letting go. Never tiring. Never ending. And never, ever letting us down. Morton, we love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I think you've given us an idea. We should start a Leadership Institute dating service, because I personally am a result of the Leadership Institute dating service, which the next person I'm introducing is my father, Tim Phillips. You may know him as the president of Americans for Prosperity. I know him as dad, and one of the reasons I know him as dad is because Morton introduced him in many ways to my mom, who at the time was a Leadership Institute employee. So I'm also a product of that, Morton. And so at that, we will bring Tim Phillips up to tell his story.
Thank you, Cabot. Well, in 1984, in January, I was in Washington, D.C. to do an internship. I knew no one in politics. I was from South Carolina. I'd really never been to D.C. at all. And I had an accent that sounded like Andy Griffith on cocaine. I mean, no one could understand me for days on end. So we had an intern speaker, the first one who would come to our lowly group, and it was this young Reagan official who had just left there to launch something called the Leadership Institute, and it was Morton Blackwell. He met Julie, my girlfriend, well, my future girlfriend, my future wife. That summer, she went to work for him, one of the early employees at that old National Right to Work building. And that summer we were dating, and she goes, you know, there's a Leadership Institute youth leadership school that you desperately need to go to. Go to it. And I went to it. At 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning it started, packed house. Morton was there from 8 until midnight, which is how long the training went. On Sunday, the next day, he was there from 8 a.m. until midnight, which is how long the training went. He ate the same greasy fast food we ate, every meal. And that night, over at least a half a carton of Oreo cookies, Morton and I stood, and he goes, Tim, that's your name? Yes, Tim. I believe that you would do well to go into a campaign. Well, I had no plans for the fall. That's for sure. None. So a week later, on his word, I was in a campaign, a congressional campaign. We lost 52-48 in a heartbreaking loss. I put all the training of LI into that. And a week later, I had gotten married to Julie. I was sitting at home with no job, and he called me up and he goes, by the way, young folks, this is before the cell phone days, okay? He had to find a landline and call me at our apartment in Lynchburg. And he goes, Tim, I got good reports on you. Go to Richmond tomorrow. There's a gubernatorial campaign you need to work on. 2 days later, based on Morton's word, I was in a gubernatorial campaign. Now, it went on and on for years on end, his work and his mentorship and his help. And here's the thing. This story is a nice story if it's just about one person. The truth is, how many of you can relate to that story? Raise your hand if you can, in your career. So many of you. It's happened dozens and dozens of times, hundreds and hundreds of times. And frankly, I think thousands of times. People getting involved, wanting to make a difference for their country and their values and their beliefs and their philosophy, not really knowing how to do it, but knowing there was a fire in your heart to do it. And then Leadership Institute and Morton Blackwell specifically find you, train you, pour their hearts into you, stand by you, and help you make a difference for the cause. That's a beautiful thing. And when you say it was a life's work for you and for Helen, I say thankful to God for that. Thank you, Morton. I tell you, I think about it, and Michael Jordan is my all-time greatest basketball player, right? No LeBron, it's Michael Jordan. They asked him a few years ago on his 50th birthday, they said, what is it you're most proud of? You've won 6 titles in the pros, you won a national championship in college, so many things. And he said, I'm proud that every single night on the court, I was consistent. I gave my best game. I played it like it was the last game of my life. I can tell you for 40 years of Leadership Institute, and I think before that in the movement for a long time, Morton, you've been consistent. You've been consistent philosophically. You've been consistent in being a friend to people. You know, I remember, the last story I'll tell, I remember in the early 90s I was launching a business and Morton called up Paul Weyrich, who was not one of the nicest guys around. He's a pretty tough guy, right? And I was very nervous, and I go in, and I go, Mr. Weyrich, look, thanks for letting me do this project. And he said, what's your name again? I go, Tim Phillips. And he goes, look, you're here because Morton Blackwell recommended you. You better not screw it up and mess his name up. And I think about all the personalities over all the years. And there's no one in the movement from then, when I first saw him in the early 80s until tonight, who brings the movement together, our movement together like Morton. And I think about that. I think about that video with new leaders, young leaders, a Ben Shapiro, a Michelle Malkin, I think 30 and 40 years ago, like a Howard Phillips or like a Paul Weyrich. And Morton has been there for all of them, helping build this movement up. So Morton, thank you. Here's to another 80 years, and here's to another 40 years of Ally. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And next up, we have the president of the National Right to Work Committee, Mr. Mark Mix. Join us. Thank you.
Well, some of you know about my fear of podiums, but this one is pretty much okay. Morton, this is an unexpected privilege, and both today and going back several years. My first encounter with Morton Blackwell started on a sunny day in Harrisonburg, Virginia, on the campus of James Madison University. I was an unideological resident of New York State who bartended at my local Democrat mayor's house when he hosted fundraisers for Democrat congressmen and congresswomen, and I registered as a Democrat. And I decided if I didn't leave that New York borough that I was probably going to end up pumping gas at my uncle's gas station. And it was a good thing I left because now it's all self-serve. So the future looked bleak. But I was walking down to the Student Center at James Madison University, and someone standing in front of a table stuck their hand out and said, hey, there's a meeting tonight. You should come, and you'll meet some great people on campus and hear some good stuff. I did not know anyone at James Madison University. In fact, I moved into my apartment the night before classes started. I ended up with 6 roommates who were a very diverse group of people. But this gentleman knew, because of his youth leadership school training, to stand in front of a table and shake my hand and say, why don't you come to the meeting? And I did. At that time, I ended up so excited about youth leadership skills and right Republican Party politics that I ended up being the campus coordinator for one Richard Viguerie running for lieutenant governor. I even got his haircut. I was so excited about that. His daughter, Renee, was on the campus, and she said, Mark, why are you so excited about my dad? And I said, well, I just started learning about Morton Blackwell and Richard Vickery and others. Richard lost, but I won. After college, I ended up going to work for a congressman placed through the Leadership Institute with a friend at the Leadership Institute. After that campaign, I ended up in the Job and Talent Bank and got an interview with this organization called Right to Work. This is 1986. I had no idea what Right to Work was. I grew up in a union household. My stepfather was a welder, 32-year member of the Machinists Union. And I ended up on a campaign, and then I got hired by this Right to Work group. I ended up in the Lion Village Community Center, I think over that way. And I heard a story about these people called Jack Mule, my daughter's in the audience tonight, #1, and Jack Mule #2. My career started, I ended up packed up my Renault Le Car and headed across the Mississippi River for the first time in my life and went to a state called New Mexico. Yes, it is part of the United States of America. I served in Gallup, New Mexico, and that campaign, that legislative project went so poorly that I was called back to Washington by Reed Larson. And I think it was about March 15th. I can't say exactly what the date was, but I was called up to Reed Larson's office. And sitting at the round table in Reed's office, which is still there today, was Morton Blackwell and another man named Henry Walther. If anyone knows Henry Walther, you know this was the Inquisition. We had failed so badly that two of us were sitting in the room with Reed and Morton and Henry, and I thought that was pretty much the end of my career. For some reason, I don't know why, whether Morton encouraged Reed to keep me on board or Henry, certainly it wasn't Henry that encouraged Reed to keep me on board, but it might have been Morton. But I think Reed said part of the deal for keeping Mark on board is that Morton is going to have to, we're going to have to put him on probation, and Mark's going to have to report to Morton every 3 months for the next 34 years. Morton is on the board of directors of the National Right to Work Committee, and he attends every meeting that I think I've been present to over the last 34 years, and I've reported to him on the progress of Right to Work. This story starts with an inquisition, and it continues on a wonderful day in front of the United States Supreme Court on June 27th, 2018. My inquisition with Morton to keep my job culminated in a moment where Morton Blackwell came down to the steps of the United States Supreme Court with 2 small boxes in hand, and I was, of course, waiting for the last case on the last day of the Supreme Court session to decide a case called Janus v. AFSCME. And Morton and I stood there, and Morton was out there, a little bit of rain, a little bit of cold, but Morton was there standing side by side with Bill Messenger and me. And after the decision, he gave us 2 little boxes with Janus cufflinks in them. I don't have a cufflink shirt, but I have the cufflinks, Morton, and someday I'll get a shirt that I can use those for. So it has been a real privilege, and throughout this whole process, from inquisition to Supreme Court victories, Morton has been by my side and been by the side of many people in this room like Tim and Kevin and others that could tell stories and stories and stories of Morton's support and care for the movement. Morton, has been a privilege to be empowered by you and the Leadership Institute and have this role of watching you continue to keep me on probation for every 3 months. I will continue to report. And Richard, thanks for the haircut. Thank you, Morton.
Well, next up we have Mr. Richard Vickery, who is chairman and founder of American Target Advertising. Mr. Vickery.
I've been looking here, but I thought we were going to have a dear friend of ours here, Dr. Lee Edwards. But like so many things in the conservative movement in the last 60 years, it had its beginning with Lee Edwards. Lee thought it would be nice one day in 1972 to get Morton and I together. I don't know if we were 2 Cajuns. He thought it would be a good idea. But anyway, we had a wonderful lunch at the Mayflower Hotel. And about 10 days later, I called Morton and said, Morton, let's have lunch again. And we did. And we talked about the conservative movement and the conservative politics. And at the end of the movement, end of the dinner, I said to Morton something that he later said was he heard magic words. And the magic words I spoke to Morton at lunch that day was, Morton, I want you to come work with me and help me build the conservative movement. And he did for 7 years. And by the way, he said I gave him a little pay increase. He said he would have taken a pay cut for the job. By the way, I don't know, maybe 16, 17 years ago, I'm walking in the office and run into Morton's son, William, who's over here, who I've known since almost the day he was born. And I say, William, what are you doing here? Oh, I work here. Oh, really? Tell me about that. So William got the job at the Viguerie company, in essence, without anybody knowing who he was. And so he and his dad are very proud of that, as they should be. And so anyway, you know, Morton comes to the office, and we begin to work on this project, that project, start publications. The Right Report that Morton edited, Conservative Digest, the Pink Sheet on the left. We're just doing, you know, all kinds of new activities. Begin to have meetings because Morton says when he came to Washington, it was a great shock to him after a year or two when he realized that every day, not once a day, not once a week, not once a month, not once a year, did Barry Goldwater, John Tower, Strom Thurmond get together and plan anything. Nobody was in charge. Nobody was leading the conservative movement. So we started to have meeting after meeting after meeting, sometimes 2, 3, 4 or more a week. One of them was every Wednesday for about 10 years. Conservative leaders in the area, 8, 9, 10 of them, Wyrick, Fulner, Morton, others here. I think Larry Pratt's here was part of it. And we would plot and plan, and then there was a period of time in the early 80s we'd get together for dinner. The same people for breakfast, this time joined by the young congressmen, Newt Gingrich, Vin Weber, Bob Walker, Hal Dobbs, and others, and plot and plan and strategize. And to the extent there was anything that could be called Hillary Clinton's vast right-wing conspiracy, that was probably it. So, there's so many memorable things about Morton, but one of the things that I have seldom heard, quite frankly, a conservative leader say, I don't know, 3, 4 years ago, Morton and I are leaving the Heritage Foundation, and I gave him a ride back to his office, and I said, Morton, what kind of a year did you have? And uncharacteristically, if I had asked a lot of my friends, he said, oh, great, Richard. We had this many more chapters, this many more campus activities, and we had this many more members, and we did this great thing and that. You know, never did he say, oh, I increased my donors 10%, or I increased my donations. You know, he thought in terms of program and projects, and it was just so refreshing to hear that. When Morton and I worked in the office, we would, regularly interact, and every once in a while we would have a disagreement on facts, a factual disagreement. And I began to keep a score. And after about 20, I decided to stop. It was Blackwell 19, Vickery 1. True story. Anyway, I don't know, earlier this year, in a Hillsdale College meeting. We do marketing for Hillsdale. They were in their Kirby Center across the street from Heritage. And the Hillsdale person who's conducting the meeting said at the beginning of the meeting, I want to go around the room, about 20 of us, and ask everybody here, if you could only make one contribution, who would you make that contribution to? And you can't say Hillsdale or your church, okay? So we had some wonderful ideas of different nonprofits and all. When it got to me, I said Leadership Institute, Morton Blackwell's LI. Because I cannot think of any organization, that's what I said then, that has had the impact in the past, the present, and is going to have the impact in the future that Morton Blackwell's Leadership Institute has had. Can you... I think I'm getting the movie right. Jimmy Stewart, It's a Wonderful Life, okay? So what would life have been like if Jimmy Stewart had never lived, okay? Can you imagine if Morton and Helen Blackwell had never lived? I mean, hundreds of thousands of young people would not be trained. We wouldn't have X number of state legislators, governors, congressmen, senators. It goes on and on and on. So, Morton, we're just, your words can't describe how important we feel you are. When I think of you now with turning 80, I'm reminded of one of my heroes in the Bible, Moses. Deuteronomy 34, verse 7. And Moses lived to be 120, and his eye was not dim, nor his vital forces abated. So 99% of what we know about Moses when he turned 80, that's when he began to lead the Israelites. So what I'm going to tell liberals now, look out, Morton Blackwell is just getting started.
Amen. And finally, we have Ms. Kay Cole James, who is the president of the Heritage Foundation.
I don't know when I first met Morton Blackwell. Everyone has a story. It can point to a particular time. I have a feeling about Morton Blackwell. And it has to do with Virginia and Virginia politics. As I was discovering that I was a conservative, because I didn't know I was originally until a reporter told me. I really didn't. And as I began to get involved in Virginia politics, there were certain names that kept coming up and people, and this whole aura built up around this person, Morton Blackwell. And what he was known for, and I haven't heard too many people talk about it tonight, he was a stickler for the rules. Morton knew every piece of information that would help him win a floor fight, either at the national or at the state level, and he became legendary for that. And so I knew of him, absorbed him, before I got to know him. Now that I've gotten to know him, I have a new name for him. Does anybody remember in American history Swamp Fox? Right. Swamp Fox was a character who figured out that just having the right ideas, the right values, and a love for this country wasn't enough. He had to figure out the tactics in order to win. So, you know, the way we used to fight wars is we would stand in red coats or blue coats, depending, stand with your musket in a straight line and shoot. Swamp Fox said that didn't make a whole lot of sense to him. And Swamp Fox looked around and observed and realized that he could learn a few lessons from the Native Americans. They attacked at night. They shot from behind trees. They knew how to fight a war. And what Morton figured out, like Swamp Fox, was that it wasn't enough just to have the right ideas. Now that's important. As the president of the Heritage Foundation, I need to say that. But once you have the right ideas, what do you do with that? How do you go out and win? And Morton figured that out. And not only did he figure it out, but he figured it how to translate that and transmit that to the next generation. Do you know how many meetings in the conservative movement I've been involved in where people are wringing their hands and saying, oh, if we could just reach minorities, women, and youth. Morton didn't go to the meetings. He just did it and has done it successfully. So I want to say to the entire conservative movement, study Morton Blackwell and you can figure it out. When you look at the videos and you see the testimonials and the people whose lives have been touched and changed, he figured it out. I want to share with you one of my biggest concerns about this country right now. And we all are concerned about the rising tide of socialism, what's happening on our college campuses, and how the liberals are taking over and winning that next generation. And quite frankly, I don't understand why Antifa is not outside your gates right now. So I think we ought to keep it like on the down low. Because there is a strategy, and that strategy is in place, and Morton is doing it. I want to say to those individuals who are here tonight that we know Morton through his work, through his accomplishments, but the one story that I want to share with you has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with a young conservative in Virginia who loves her Commonwealth and who loves this nation and shares our conservative values. And one thing that we know about Morton is he is a recognizer of talent, and when he sees it, he points it in the right direction. And we've heard success stories about what happens when Morton taps you on the shoulder and says, I think you should. One night I met Morton and Helen in the lobby of a hotel, and Morton gave me that tap on the shoulder. And he talked to me about a leadership position that he thought I should take. And when Morton taps you on the shoulder, you listen. And I sat there that night with tears in my eyes and shared with Helen and Morton the trauma that we were going through in our family with one of our kids. And I said, Morton, I don't want to say no to you. But right now, with what we're dealing with in our family, I think the answer is going to have to be no. And Morton and Helen put their arms around me, loved me, cared for us through that. And with all we know about his greatness and what we know about how smart he is, how strategic he is, and the contribution that he's made, I want you to know about his heart. I want you to know what a friend he can be and what a friend he has been to us for all these many years. And so, Morton, you made a promise tonight to me, and I want to make sure everyone here knows it. We took a picture together back there, and I said, Morton, I'm here for your 80th. I want you to come to my 80th. It's in about 10 years. And we will celebrate together. Because Morton, I can't tell you when I first met him, he always was. He is. And because of the legacy that he's grown in this room, he always will be. And so, Morton, thank you for your contribution to the conservative movement. But tonight, I just want to thank you for being a friend.
Thank you for that. Now there are a lot of people that weren't able to make it tonight that we wanted to include their messages as well, so please enjoy this little video we've put together.
Oh, my dearest friend and patriot, Morton Blackwell, I will never forget meeting you in that Beltway swamp many, many years ago when I was a denizen, almost, oh my goodness, 10, 11, 12 years ago, having known of the work that you did and being delighted that you were just as much a lion-hearted warrior in person as you were in print and how I knew you from the work that you did. You are such a blessing, and it is such a blessing to know you. A little birdie told me that you are celebrating your 80th birthday, and I'm astonished to know that you are 80 years young. I have told many people that I hope to be as vigorous and engaged at 80 as you are now, and I hope that you have a day and another year filled with joy and productivity and fierceness and courage. Mwah! Happy birthday.
Morton, happy birthday. They say you're 80 years old. I hope to reach your age one day. I don't know where you get your energy from, but I thank you, and I thank you for all you've done for the conservative movement over almost half a century. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you for 40 years at the Leadership Institute and for your 80 years of service to this country, fighting for the principles that make America special, make America great. Thank you for doing that, and the impact you've had has been tremendous.
Morton, it's an honor to stand and fight alongside you and other happy warriors each and every day for smaller government and greater liberty. Thank you for your leadership, your commitment to advancing conservative principles, and your continued efforts to save our great nation. Happy birthday, Morton, God bless you.
Happy birthday, Morton. I've known you longer than I care to admit to, but I've been grateful to have your friendship and mentorship over the years. You gave me my first job here in Washington, D.C., for which I'm ever grateful, and I wish you and yours the best on your 80th birthday.
Happy birthday, Morton. Truly, he has been someone for 80 years that has been a stalwart of the conservative movement. And when people would come and go, you could always count on Morton to be someone who was there, willing to be a principled conservative, and ultimately not back down for a fight. So I wish Morton the happiest of birthdays, and hopefully there will be 80 more to come.
Morton has been an example for so many of us. He has planted so many seeds, and I think our country would not be the same if it wouldn't be for him, and the generous way in which he has tried to reach out to foreign countries. I know how much he has done in Chile, but I know his efforts and programs he has done in Europe. So. Again, Morton Blackwell is one of those great citizens of the United States, and thank you for everything that you have done, Morton, in this, I think, wonderful 80 years.
Morton is one of those people who doesn't get the credit that he deserves. He's a linchpin. He's the person that's held things together, that has brought people together, and is not does that without getting his name in billboards or in newspaper headlines, but he's there and he's critical. None of this, I would be surprised if a lot of the success of the conservative movement would have happened without him. I think he was the critical element in a lot of the success of the conservative movement over the years, so this is a time to pay tribute to Morton for the work that he's done and to give him some of the credit that he deserves.
Morton has been part of the scene in this town for so long that it's tempting to see him almost as part of the background, a sort of permanent Washington standing institution like the Willard Hotel or the Jefferson Monument or something. But it's worth recalling that the achievement of the Leadership Institute, now in its 40th year, has been secured by constant energy and enterprise, and by the attention of its founder. And when I think of the 200,000 plus people who have benefited from what you've done here, that surely is a greater monument than any of the stone memorials that decorate this extraordinary city. You have made American politics a better place for conservatives, and therefore, as Rob said, a better place, despite themselves, for liberals too, because they will all benefit from the policies and the ideas that you've been teaching.
Well, if I could sing, I would say happy birthday in singing, but my goodness, what do you say to someone so accomplished and yet so personal and so dear, except happy birthday, Morton. 80 is incredible, and my goodness, when you get to heaven, that room of marvels, where you go up and touch a little picture and then their life comes alive, you have a very, very big room. You are just an incredible person, and I am just honored that God would cross our paths and connect us the way that He has with you and your lovely wife. And I want to say happy 80th birthday, Morton Blackwell.
Morton, you are a wonderful man, a man of God, a man of character, a man who loves this country, a man who served our President Reagan so well. You've done so many things, blessed so many lives, turned so many kids' lives in a good direction, and in doing that, turned our country in a good direction. Your work has been a blessing to this country for 40 years, and you have been living twice that amount, which I think makes you about 47. We just really are grateful for your birthday, for your many decades of work, and Morton, I say it for everybody, we love you.
Hey everybody, Cliff Maloney here, Young Americans for Liberty. Morton, just want to wish you a happy 80th birthday. So privileged and honored to know you, to call you a friend, to call you a mentor. For those in the room that don't know, Morton was really the reason that YAL was able to get its wings. We were located in the LI building as an opportunity to develop, to grow, and to really become what we are today. And one of the things I really appreciate with Morton is his quote that he's trying to build a movement, not an empire. And I think it really shows in the work that he's doing, the work that all of the 83 staffers at the Leadership Institute are doing, training over 218,000 activists. You want to talk about real leaders and real legwork to build the next generation? Conservative and libertarian leaders owe it to the Leadership Institute for all of the work that they've done to lay the groundwork for us to have success, not just today, but also tomorrow. I want to thank everybody in the room, everybody there that's a part of this, that supported LI. Morton, I'm excited about what we have to come in the future, the partnership between Young Americans for Liberty and the Leadership Institute. But I just sincerely want to say thank you. Congrats on 80 years old. Congrats on 40 years of the Leadership Institute. Your legacy is set, but this is just the beginning. Thanks, everybody. Happy birthday, Morton.
And now, Morton, I'm going to ask you to come up here. We got an envelope earlier today. The return address says Pennsylvania Avenue, 1600. I don't think this is something I should open because this has your name on it. So if you could come up here, we're going to have you open this, and if you could read this out loud for everyone to hear, I think that would be wonderful.
The glass is broken, but it can be replaced. The White House, Washington, November 16th, 2019. Mr. Morton Blackwell, Arlington, Virginia. Dear Mr. Blackwell, Melania and I are delighted to join your loved ones in wishing you a happy 80th birthday. As you celebrate this special occasion, I hope you are surrounded by the love and admiration of your family and friends. I also want to congratulate you on the 40th anniversary of the Leadership Institute. Your dedication in promoting conservative values and activism has made a positive impact in communities across our nation. I pray that your year ahead is filled with good health and much happiness. I gather this is my last opportunity this evening to get up here to this microphone.
Not yet. We have one more thing for you. One more thing. So, oh, excuse me. I don't want to break this glass as well. On behalf of everyone here and all the people that you've impacted and the generations moving forward that you've inspired, we all collectively wanted to give you the Lifetime Achievement Award for Conservative Leadership. So, Morton, we thank you so much.
All right. Very nice. I want to take this final opportunity to thank the donors of the Leadership Institute. We could not have done 1% of what we've done without the generous donors to the Leadership Institute. And I'm more than humbled by all this praise. You know, I'm a fairly reasonable guy, and I'm pretty sure that nobody is as good as you've tried to make me today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Please say hi to Morton if you're able to before you leave. If you'd like, we have a Leadership Institute banner. We'd encourage all of you guys to get a picture in front of that to commemorate the occasion. If you'd like to get a tour, make sure to stick around, and we can have one of our team members give a tour of all the new facilities that our donors have made possible. But thank you for joining us to celebrate the Leadership Institute and Mr. Morton Blackwell.
Thanks so much for watching this video. To watch our latest video, click here. And to make sure you don't miss any future videos, be sure to subscribe.